Next today, we're going to look at how this process works. So we're going to go through the steps of the Electoral College process and how the votes are actually counted and what would happen if this system is not going to work out. So what you see in the picture here, this is on Electoral College Day in Congress. So what we have pages from each of the 50 states. They are carrying the state's official electoral votes in to the Congress for the official counting of the electoral votes. So a very important ceremonial process, but the official counting of votes to determine who becomes president of the United States. So on the official day where the votes are counted, this takes place in a joint session of Congress. A joint session of Congress means that the House and the Senate are meeting together. This is going to take place over on the House of Representatives side where there's a lot more room for everybody, but this means all 535 congressmen will be in attendance there. The current vice president, the standing vice president, is going to preside over this meeting since they are the president of the Senate. So it'll be their job to open and close the meeting, to bring people down to speak and all that. Each state is going to present a box with their certified electoral votes. And in the House and the Senate and the Senate are each going to have one Democrat and one Republican count the votes. So there will be 4 people there: a House Republican, a House Democrat, a Senate Republican, a Senate Democrat. That way, each chamber and each party can monitor the process and make sure that there's no cheating going on. In the event that there would be some kind of fraud in a state, then a congressman is able to object in writing to a state's electoral votes if they can give reasons why those states' votes should not be counted, as long as we have a member of each chamber agree. So a member of the House and the member of the Senate can work together. They can get a state's electoral votes thrown out. Now this has never happened. But this allows us to deal with a situation where there would be fraud in a state. So a congressman and a senator could protest a state's electoral votes in the event that there was some sort of problem with the election in that state. To become president of the United States, a candidate has to earn a majority of the electoral votes. For a very long time, there have been 538 electoral votes, 538 total, so a candidate has to get 270 of those to win. They have to have one more than half in order to become president. They must get a majority. That's required by the Constitution. Getting the most votes is not enough. Getting a plurality of the votes, meaning they got the most, is not enough. And so what that means is, if we're in a situation where there's only 2 candidates that are getting electoral votes, then one of them is always going to have a majority. One of them is always going to have more than half. But we're talking about a situation where if there were 3 candidates that were getting electoral votes, then it becomes mathematically possible for someone to get the most votes but not have more than half of the votes. So if they don't have more than half of the votes, they have not satisfied the requirements of the Constitution to become president. So here, as long as there's only 2 candidates running, somebody's going to get more than half. But if there were more than 2 candidates running, it's possible that a candidate does not get more than half of the votes, even if they have the most votes. If that's the case, when the votes are counted, if no candidate has a majority of the votes, then the House must go into session immediately. It's going to be the job of the House to choose the president. So the House is going to vote on who becomes the president, and each state is only going to get 1 vote here. Now, the representatives are going to get together and vote. They're going to decide who they think the president ought to be, but they're going to be limited. They can only choose who came in the top 3 in getting electoral votes. So if there were multiple candidates that got electoral votes, they can only choose from among the top 3 vote getters here. But each state is only going to get 1 vote. So some of the very, very small states that only have 1 representative, that person just gets to vote. But in the larger states like California, Texas, New York, those representatives are going to have to vote inside the state and decide which candidate the state will support. So in order for a candidate to become president in this situation, they must have the support of a majority of the states. So they must have, and currently they must have the support of 26 states in order to become president. It's possible with 3 candidates out there that no candidate is able to get the support of 26 states. And if that's the case, then they're just going to have to vote again. They're going to have to keep voting until one of the candidates is going to end up with the support of a majority of the states. When they counted the electoral votes, if no candidate got a majority of the votes, the Senate also has to go into session immediately. It will be the job of the Senate to choose the vice president. So, just like in the House, the senators will only be able to choose from among the top 3 electoral vote earners for vice president. So, among the top 3 candidates for vice president, the senators will have to vote. Now, in the House, each state only got 1 vote, but here in the Senate, each individual senator gets a vote. So the senators get to vote for themselves on the next vice president. Now, there will always be an even number of senators since there's 2 per state, and so it is possible that there's a tie here. In the event of a tie, just like any other process in the Senate, the vice president, the current vice president, will have the ability to break a tie. This is a weird situation because the current vice president may be one of the people that the Senate is deciding on. The current vice president may be up for re-election, and so the current vice president may be able to vote to break a tie and vote for themselves. So the standing vice president votes to break a tie in this situation. Now, a candidate to become vice president, a candidate is going to have 51 votes in the Senate in order to become the vice president. The other weird thing about this situation, since the House is choosing the president and the Senate is choosing the vice president, the president and vice president do not have to be running mates. We could end up in a situation where Democrats had more support in the House, and so the president was a Democrat, but in the Senate, Republicans had more support, and so the vice president was a Republican. So we could end up with a situation where the president and the vice president were not actually running mates. Just a weird little feature of this plan. All right, now we mentioned this for both of the House and the Senate plans here, but in the event that no one was able to get a majority, if the House and Senate could not agree, they couldn't ultimately come to a decision, they're just going to have to keep voting until they do. And there is a plan in place if they don't get there by a certain deadline. So if we got to Inauguration Day, the House could not decide on a president, and Inauguration Day comes along. The 20th Amendment says the new president must take over on this 3rd Monday in January. So if we get to Inauguration Day and the House has not decided on a president, then the vice president becomes president until the House can decide. So if the Senate had chosen a vice president but the House couldn't figure it out, then the vice president is just going to become president until they can figure it out. In the event that that the Senate hadn't decided, we didn't have a vice president, then the Speaker of the House is going to become the vice president until the Senate is able to decide on the vice president. So we have this plan in place with the presidential succession plans here. There will always be a president, there will always be a vice president, but we have this plan in place in order to make sure that we're going to find someone for both of these roles here. All right, so that walks us through the process of the Electoral College, of counting the votes and what to do if no one is able to get a majority of those electoral votes. So now we know how to choose a president, we know how the Electoral College works and everything. Let's look at some of the reasons why people are unhappy with the Electoral College. So we're going to look at some of the criticism of the Electoral College and some of the potential reforms.